If you're new here, my name is RuthAnn. My husband Lance was a service connected, disabled U.S. Navy veteran. He was sick for 25 of the 27 years we were together, and for the last 12 years of his life, I was his full time caregiver. This podcast is about caregiving in all its forms. As our parents age and begin to need help, we are faced with choices we need to make. Every situation is different, and for some, they're unable to take care of their parents for various reasons. Maybe it's a job or other obligation, lack of resources, or maybe their parents just live too far away. But for others, there isn't a choice not to care for their parents because of their culture. And that's the case with my friend David, who is here to share part of his story. David, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, RuthAnn. Glad to be here.
Can you tell us a bit about your cultural background and how that shapes the expectation that family cares for family? And then also how that influenced your approach to caring for your parents?
Well, I'm a first generation Portuguese American. My parents migrated here from Portugal, and they joined their existing families here in the States. My dad and my mother's side of the family were here. Some of my aunts and uncles were already here. So I'm an only child, so we kind of, grew up with that dynamic, that cell, if you will, Portuguese American cell, and some of them were already very familiar with the culture here in the States and helped my parents assimilate and get settled as they were going to start their own family. That's me. I'm an only child. My dad married a little later in life, but always had that extended family around growing up. Always had a big Portuguese American community in Danbury, Connecticut. We had a club. We had, a social club. So there was a lot of people from the old country coming over to the new country, a lot of back and forth, kids being born, and that culture being ingrained in the newer children like myself. So, yeah, it was good. It was good upbringing in that, being part of that, in that community. So, and other factions had it too, like the Italians had their social club, and the French had theirs, and the Russians had theirs there. There was a lot of diverse cultures. It was a big melting pot, the Northeast, at that time in the 70s and 60s and so forth.
As an only child, how did you feel when you realized the full responsibility of caring for your parents would be completely on you? And did you wish at that time that you had siblings to help you with that responsibility?
I realized I had to do a lot of translation for my parents, because this is later in school, first, second, third grade, it really started, uh, uh, escalating as far as the translation. My my mother and my mother was better at English than my dad. Like I said, my dad came over here later. He was already 35, but my mom was she understood once it was explained and translated to her. The problem with being part of a community that's already established in there is they speak, even at work, there's large pockets of Portuguese people. So they spoke in Portuguese. The English wasn't, as quickly to come and learn as just being thrown out there and not having Portuguese people around. They did have Portuguese people around. Some were, pretty diverse in English and Portuguese, and would translate to my mother or father in Portuguese, or back to Portuguese. So my parents, that was a crutch there, that my parents didn't learn English as fast as they should have, because they had all these, people helping them in Portuguese. But yeah, and then me at home translating and helping them there. So I felt a little bit empowered too. I didn't know it at the time, but thinking back on it, I felt like, oh, okay, sometimes I would translate things in my favor, Uh, so yeah, as I got a little, smarter at it, as I, matured too, and uh, you
And
know,
did
moved
they
in.
ever catch you in that?
Yeah, I mean, eventually they would, and they would have to be, smarter with their questions and translation, what they want to translate it and think about it, you know. But as far as having a sibling, the only reason I wanted a sibling was somebody to play with. Being an only child, you're alone all the time. I always ran out to the outside and look for friends and that type of thing. But the sibling thing wasn't for me wasn't a big void in my life. I mean, I had cousins, like we had an extended family there in town. I had a lot of cousins on my dad's side, uncles and friends. And, again, we were part of that community. There were a lot of other children that, you can hook up with and stuff. So it wasn't, through the church and through the social club and obviously through school too. In neighborhoods. But the '70s were a different time. Kids ran out and hooked up and played and did all kinds of things. So it was good. I mean, the translation was the biggest part of it, and there was highs and lows. There was some frustration, you know, more financial frustrations, not family dynamic frustration.
So your caregiving journey really began pretty early in your life, being their translator. And then that, I would imagine, progressed as time went on. You did explain a little bit of that. And it sounds like maybe because you were surrounded by family when you were growing up, you really didn't think about the responsibility of caring for your parents as you got older because you just had all of that support right there. But then you and your wife moved halfway across the country. And then it was about 9 years ago when you helped move your parents closer to you because of their age. What were the signs that you noticed that made you realize it was going to be hard to help them with them living halfway across the country?
Well, it was actually from a couple of visits I did, and the you know 3 years. I'd visit my parents like every 3 years, probably at the most. So I saw the deterioration in the upkeep of their existing home up in Connecticut, and how they were just you know surviving. And I don't mean surviving like surviving like they were hurting or anything. I mean, just how they were living, and I I, I didn't see it sustainable as far as taking care of themselves in the long term. So, and a lot of the family members, and now at this time, 25 years later, a lot of my cousins moved away, and a lot of my aunts and uncles have passed now. So my parents were kind of alone. Uh, and that wasn't going to be good in, in Connecticut with the winters and my dad, getting a lot older and my mother getting a lot older. So physically, they couldn't do as much as, they did. So we talked about, them becoming closer to me and um, and of course I had my doubts how long I was going to be in this area, but in the short term, I think it was the right move to move them closer to me, and that's what we did. And they thought that the move is fine, but they thought they wouldn't be able to sell the house. We sold the house in a week. But so they were kind of shocked as how fast things can move. But they were on board. They were a little in shock, but they were on board. So Jenny and I helped that whole, we kind of drove that whole process and helped them.
Coordinating a cross-country move sounds, well, actually, I know from experience, it's a lot of work. Can you kind of walk us through that process? What are the things that you did to make that easier on them?
First and foremost is explain to them the process, make sure they understood what is going to happen if we move forward with this. And I made that clear to them. And I made that, and we let time process it a little bit, let it sink in, and revisit it, and re-explained everything and made sure they were on board, because I didn't want to start something, because it's serious, want to start something that's going to cause a lot of issues. So once that was done, I did the basic things, got a realtor, and talked to the realtor, had the realtor go over, meet my parents, and all of that, establish, put the house on the market, price, all that, entertained offers and all of that. Now my mom was there. She kind of, my dad was not involved. He kind of just sat on the sidelines. But my mom, she listened, and she just followed directions, and gave whatever information she could to the realtor, and so forth. So it went relatively smooth. I mean, we didn't have any issues. So I hired movers. I had a couple movers go out there, and made sure my mom got rid of stuff she didn't want prior, and so we can get a couple bids on movers quotes. Uh, that went pretty smooth too. Finally selected one. I spoke with them, because I've moved cross country a few times, so I had, Jenny and I had a lot of experience with that. Um, it was pretty easy, actually. I wasn't stressed out about that. Everything kind of fell into place. Everything worked out. And then when finally we sold the house and everything, everybody, movers came, got everything. Jenny and I flew up there, and we drove my parents down here. They stayed with us. We were making an offer on a house. So I found a house relatively quick, a house that's perfect for them. So a lot of timing was on our side. A lot of things worked out. Could be luck, or I don't know, but a lot of things worked out. So they had to stay with us a couple weeks before the house was ready. The new house down here helped them. Actually, the movers moved the stuff from Connecticut into the new house, into the house they purchased. So that worked out great.
I think that's one of the nice things about hiring movers is a lot of times they can hold on to your things until you're ready to move into a house if it's just going to be a short time versus packing everything up into a U-Haul and doing it yourself. Then you have to find a place to store those things while you wait.
Right, right, and we that's what we were trying to avoid. We told them to take their time with it. We're not in a hurry. We need a couple extra days, and I think from the route they did do that, because we were thinking, oh man, we might have to unload everything at the house we were living at in the garage and all of that. We did have the room for it, but it would have been twice the work, unloading load. But we avoided that. That was good. We got lucky.
And because of the language barrier, I would imagine you had to help them set up all of their things like utilities and all that good stuff.
Right. Everything. Yeah. Transfer. Yeah. All that had to be set up. Jenny did a lot of that, as far as the utilities, and, taking them, getting their, driver's license, car registered, all of those things, insurance. We primarily drove all that.
In those early days after they moved closer to you, they were mostly independent with taking care of the lawn and the house. What kinds of support did you provide then, and how did that fit into your life as a parent with your job, all of those things?
In the beginning, my parents were independent. They took care of all that, the lawn, the house, uh, you know, day to day events. I mean, it was not a problem. And my mother till this day she does the yard, and it entertains her, It entertained my dad at the time in the beginning too. So that was not an issue. I mean, it wasn't an inconvenience. If they needed certain things, help getting things or buying things or information or something, that we I gave it to them. But other than that, in the beginning, it wasn't a problem. It really isn't a problem even to this day with my mom. She she goes out there for a couple hours a week, if not more. I mean, shit, she goes out quite a bit and entertains herself and with the yard. And she used to grow a little garden, keeps her busy, and so it is slowing down now with her age and her health. She's a diabetic, so, and she's not treating her diabetes. She doesn't want to treat her diabetes. So right now it's like, a time bomb, I think, with with her. She's a strong woman physically, but I think it's a time bomb waiting to happen because she doesn't want insulin. She's 84, and she's complaining about her back, her stomach, and all the symptoms Jennie and I researched on what happens to a diabetic not taking insulin as they get older and deteriorate.
I know it does help your when you're aging, it helps you maintain your independence when you continue to do some of those things like lawn work and keeping the house, things like that. So it sounds like that's in a lot of ways help keep her strong and healthy other than the diabetes. But I know that shortly or within a couple of years after you moved your parents closer to you, that your dad became sick and he ended up in and out of the hospital. He was hospitalized multiple times. During that time, how did you balance everything?
I just accept it as part of life. I mean, my life, um, that's that was my job, taking care of that. Again, these things became instilled in me as I grew up. Saw them through my other family members, what they did with their parents and helped, and how my cousins, aunts and uncles all helped each other. Um, so it was just part of the deal, if you will. Being so, part of, when I as a kid translating, just you just grow up being so attached, to the mental psyche of with them, that you control it. I'm the boss, I control the whole deal. What's going to happen, what we need to do, and so forth, because that's just they pass that along to me, and I just accept it. I mean, it's just part of the way I was brought up. um, those responsibilities. I mean, it was just part, go to work, do my daily stuff, add this to the agenda, might check on dad, check on mom. Jennie would help too. So it was all part of, that, part of our task, our daily life task, at that time.
So while you're talking about this, I'm just thinking about your culture, how that is just so ingrained in you. And that's not something that I grew up with. So I'm just trying to wrap my mind around that a little bit. And I guess I had never thought about the fact that you because you had to interpret from such a young age that really you were the one calling the shots in a lot of ways. So that's an interesting perspective on it.
So I had to know, I had to be sure on certain decisions, I wasn't making, and of course I was, even when I was younger, I wasn't sure if I'm making a mistake or not, or, you know, you just roll the dice sometimes and okay. Or sometimes we'd have to reach out. It was a little bit unfortunate. My parents didn't have a closer relationship with their brothers and sisters. I mean, they were there, but I I thought it would be a lot better. It was close, but not close in a sense where they would give, more in-depth advice, but they and everybody had their own families to contend with and all that. But in retrospect, I think back and I'm like, well, why didn't Uncle, Al say this to my dad back in the day or show him that, blah, blah, blah. I was too young to understand at the time, then, but now you think about those things and how certain things could have turned out different. But anyway, till this day, I look up the front room here and we've got an extra bedroom. If my mom has a stroke, on the back of my mind, I'm thinking, is she going to have to come here with a home caregiver and blah, 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 if she can't stay by her, live by herself, or do we need to, find a place? So those things are more occupying my mind right now because it's becoming, I think we're getting to that point, or we're approaching that point. Every day, I don't call my mom every day. I call my mom like every other day. And when I hear her on the phone, she seems like she's okay physically, mentally. That's another day I check check off that, okay, I don't have to deal with it today, that type of thing. But it's coming. I
Yeah.
know it's coming. Yeah.
It's good that you're checking on her regularly because then you can start to notice those earlier signs and symptoms of aging. And
Yeah, and I see the symptoms are more prominent now. Um, I see some alarming, symptoms sometimes, so I have to deal with that.
well, let's go back a little bit. I think it was about 6 years ago when your dad really started getting sick and was in and out of the hospital. And then during that first hospitalization, your mom fell and broke her wrist and needed surgery. And then she couldn't drive for a short period of time. So then you and Jennie really had to pick up the slack and take care of a lot of things at that time. Can you tell me what that was like for you? Did that change anything for you, or did it make you realize that it was getting closer to you needing to take on more responsibility?
Well, it was a precursor. It gave me kind of a snapshot of what I could expect in the years to come. I mean, I knew she would heal from it. And, I in that little event, I took her to the doctor and, we just, translated what needed to be done and all of that stuff and what's the best for her at the time to have done. But it was okay. I mean, it wasn't a big, I mean, it was a big deal. She fell and broke her wrist, but it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't that much of an inconvenience for me. And Jennie helped too. I think it was during the summer. I forget. Jennie had a lot of time. I think it was during the summer this happened. It was during teachers have summers off. Um, and I would go there after work just to check on things. And we would pick up things they need. And yeah, it was fine. It lasted like a month, little over. And then my mother was able to drive again and do things.
And then eventually your dad went home on hospice and he passed away a short time later. What was that transition like for you?
Well, that transitions has been happening, that whole year. So he was in and out of the hospital a couple times. And that last one, he went in. I knew it was, 50-50, he's going to come out. So we were already prepared. My mother was prepared already. They were pretty adamant about him not having tubes or anything, or, being hooked up to machines and so forth. Um, he was 88, and, a lot of his organs were fit, his heart, his kidneys, his liver, that was all going. So if he was able to get in hospice at a facility, I think he would have done that if insurance covered it. I mean, they had good insurance, with Medicare and then supplemental, but for some reason, uh, being in hospice in a facility, they they didn't want to. Medicare had a lot of opposition to it, but they would cover everything at the home if he went home and had care, nurse, home care, the whole bit. That was all covered. So we did that. And my mom was home, so my mom took care of him too. So that transition it wasn't like a shock. It was like, okay, this is happening now, and we don't know how long he can last. He can last a year like this. He can, you know, we didn't know how much time he was going to last. So he only lasted like 8 days, I think.
Is it part of your culture that you talk about death? Because I know that a lot of people are just really uncomfortable with that, but it sounds like your parents already had a plan. They weren't in denial of it. And that made the transition easier on everyone.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we talked about. I mean, my parents were, and a lot of my family members. We already had our cemetery plots 10 years prior. I mean, being Catholic, being part of the church, death is always death is always hovering, right? You got to be good. So yeah, death is not a taboo or anything. With death, we could talk about it openly. I talk about death with my mom today. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Wow. That's a huge difference from a lot of people I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of life with me. I mean, it's part of it's death is going home.
Yeah,
We're,
I like
I
that.
mean, I don't want to get into the religion thing, but you know, but we're not home. We're not truly home right now. We're on a journey, but you want to make it home.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that. It's a good way to look at it. Makes death less scary.
yeah, yeah.
Well, so you mentioned that you're noticing some changes in your mom, and are you having to do a little bit more for her now? I think you mentioned at one time during one of our previous conversations that you're driving a little bit more for her now.
I'm more in tune, I guess, or doing a little bit more, yeah, driving, grocery shopping with her, a little bit more, not much more, because she's still independent and wants to be, and I'm enjoying the time I can have her be on her own and be independent and have my time too, where I don't have to get so involved if I don't need to. But I'm not sure what with my mother. I'm not sure what the next you know phase is going to be. I think realistically and practically, the next thing is she's not going to be driving in the next couple months. Now, yesterday she went to the senior citizen recreation center on her own. She goes to Walmart on her own, which is very close by. She gets in the car. I mean, it's just like a mile, 2 miles, if that. and she'll do that. But that's muscle memory. A lot of that's muscle memory. She is careful, and I'm just hoping that can last a little while longer before she can't drive anywhere. That's going to be a pretty big change for her. Not that, I mean, she goes out once or twice. She used to go out a lot more, 3 or 4 times a week, but now it's, once or twice a week driving.
Yeah.
So once the driving stops, it's gonna be a little bit more put on me as far as what she needs and services as far as grocery shopping. I'm gonna have to do more grocery shopping, but also we're gonna have to find things like Amazon delivery and Walmart grocery stuff, drop off, and because those things will start, which is a big help.
I know it's a big loss to her independence once she's not able to drive anymore. Have you talked to her about that? And also, you did talk earlier about having a front bedroom available for her when the time comes. Have you talked to her about that?
Yeah, I made comments, what we'll do. I mean, it's not a big deal.
And she seems to be okay with that?
Well, yeah, she's okay with that. She seems to be, she's trying to hang in there as long as she can. She doesn't want to, come, she doesn't want anything to happen to her, obviously. But if a stroke happens or a heart attack or something significant to her physically, um, you know, we're going to have to deal with it. So she wants to stay in her home as long as she can.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Most of us
So,
would like that, right?
yeah, she's going to want to do that. So it depends on what happens. We don't know, can
Yeah.
she stay in her home, or is it better for her to come here, sell the home, get her the care she wants? I don't know, or go to somewhere else. That's a problem with this country. This country doesn't take care of our senior citizens.
Yep.
I mean,
I would agree with that.
there's so much we can do for our senior citizens, um, and to make it more affordable, because not everybody has the money. I see these great senior citizen facilities, but they cost 5,000, 4,000 a month. I don't know how people can afford that. You're telling me your average American can work all their lives, save their nest egg or whatever, and get it wiped out within a year, in a couple years. Uh, I mean, that's
Is
not right either. I think we need to do something better.
is that different in Portugal?
I was looking at a chart today as far as retirement accounts, where most European countries, there's mandatory contribution you have to do for your retirement. There's like A, B, C category, D, E, F, and the U.S. sits in like category C with like 20 other countries. We're rated like a C plus for that, where you got most of your Scandinavian countries in category one, a lot of European countries in category two, because healthcare and just social economics, when you get old, you're going to need certain things, and these other countries are preparing you for those things. Although our system is good, it's a solid C plus, they said. But then again, we have 300 plus million people in this country alone. So we need something that's gonna fit us better.
Reflecting on your entire journey from being an interpreter for your parents at a very young age and throughout their life, and to now starting to take over some of the care for your mom, just little things. What have been the most rewarding parts of caring for your parents?
Just being there for them, translating. The journey never stops. It just keeps, the situation and dealing with the situation just keeps going and going and going. There isn't any break in it. So to reflect back on it, it's the journey. It's a never ending process, you know, where we are today, where we were in the beginning, as far as what my parents accomplished. Yeah, they accomplished quite a bit, you know, with what they had and what they, you know, their means and everything. So, did I help them a little bit with that? Yeah, probably.
I think it sounds like you helped them a lot.
My parents were very hardworking. Um, Here's an example. My parents, you know, immigrants, and the wealth, if you measure, you know, you measure sometimes by wealth, right? So what my parents accumulated in wealth, I will never accumulate. And I'm grew up here, went to school here, you know, went to college here and everything. I will never accumulate what my parents accumulated in wealth.
Well, what have been the biggest challenges for you caring for your parents, especially being an only child?
Me not having the information, sometimes I wasn't able to translate because I didn't understand what I was translating. So that was the biggest challenges. And where do I find out? You know, the TV. Back then we didn't have internet, right? The newspaper. That's when I started reading the newspaper a lot. To be honest with you, I read the newspaper a lot. Because there was a lot of good information in our local newspaper, right? And I knew what was going on. Yeah. So school teachers, you know, and a lot of the teachers, with especially with you know the first generation kids, knew what we were doing. We were translating for mom and dad and so forth. It was they knew the deal. They knew the situation. It wasn't just me. It was with the Puerto Ricans, the Italians, the Portuguese, Brazilian. I mean, the Cambodians, Vietnamese. They knew all us kids translate for our mom and dad.
So your life really started off with a pretty high level of responsibility, and you had to learn two languages right from the beginning.
Yeah, that was, you know, when you're little, that was a little, you know, what I hated about that is my English comprehension. I was in a fog a lot, and that hurt me, you know, because I needed that extra time to comprehend or learn, and I didn't. So there was a lot of things that was foggy until you know, I found out later, you know. So it kind of, you know, it was a little bit of a setback.
I think that's a really important point for our listeners, especially with our immigrants now. There are a lot of children in situations just like the one that you grew up in, where they're born into a family where they speak a foreign language, and then once they start school, they start off behind because they're not speaking English. So they've got to learn English in addition to their original language, and that's just a lot.
Right. In my case, like second grade, first grade, I had to go. They pulled me out of class, and I had to go. I don't know what it was called, resources or something. I had to go out to walk out to the trailer, meet with another instructor, and he would teach me uh, English. This, you know, the vowels and we'd practice the sentences and, you know, paragraph, you know, reading. I mean, basic stuff. And I was a little like, well, I know that, you know. So it was kind of given to. It was a little frustrating too, but sometimes it helped a little bit. I mean, I learned it really quick, obviously, or whatever they were doing or trying to teach me, because I learned it on my own already. You know, from TV and newspapers and reading comics and, you know, signs and all of that. Watching sports. That was our learning platform back then.
For people who might be in similar situations, especially with the cultural expectations of family, what advice would you give to people who are going through something like what you're going through, having to start caring for your mom?
You really have to understand the reality of what is happening, and that's sometimes hard to do. I mean, you you just take it one little step at a time, and figuring out or and retrieving the information you need to deal with what's happening at the moment. And you do have to also do the research, a step or two down the road, if what possibilities might happen, what path you're going to have to, what looks like you're going to have to better prepare for in care, and explore those resources. It's homework. It's like going to it's like having an assignment in school again, and you have to treat it that way. Unfortunately, it's so convoluted, and this whole process is so convoluted and misguided and mismanaged. I don't know what the word. It's very disappointing. It should be a clear, distinct path, but in the U.S. they don't do that because everybody's in everybody's pocket. The drug companies, the healthcare, everybody wants a piece or wants to avoid doing certain things. I'm not sure what's going on, but if you excuse my language, it's a clusterfuck. At the end of the day, yeah, it's better just have mom and dad die at home and give them the drugs they need, and someone to help you out. Probably that's the best way. But to, I don't know, put them in a facility to prolong their life if they're in really bad shape, to me, that's not part of my culture. It's not, at least the majority of it. We, being a Portuguese American and European type of person, we kind of, let life happen. If life is meant to expire, we just let it go. Let it go organically. At least that's the way, you know, my perspective is, or has been, you know, taught to me. So yeah, hooking everybody up to tubes and machines and drugs, it gets exhausting. It's not meant to be.
Yeah. And you're really, when you do something like that, and I know a lot of people, that's a tough conversation, but you're just prolonging the inevitable. And a lot of times I know that when my husband was sick, actually before he got really sick, we had that discussion about what he wanted and what he didn't want. And he didn't want any of that. He didn't want to be hooked up to life support or tubes or anything like that. And those are really important conversations to have. But I
Yeah,
think people are not having them. So sounds like it's just a good idea to not live in denial of it. And it sounds like your family has done a really good job of communicating about that.
I think I have, and I mentioned to you earlier about my aunt down in Florida, my father's sister. She, she, I grew up with her in Connecticut. She was there in Connecticut, but they moved to Florida years ago, and she's now in I think a one bedroom efficiency. She has cancer, and she's dying. But my cousin's down there, my taking care of her. So she's not doing anything to prolong her life. I mean, she's probably taking some medication for the pain, but she's just, living day to day.
I guess I haven't really talked to many people about the cultural differences in how we care for our aging parents. So this was a really good conversation. It shined a light on a lot of things. I think communication is one of the most important things, and it's something that is lacking a lot in the American culture. Denial of death is a big thing. So I appreciate you sharing your story, all the things that you did, and thank you for doing the things that you do to care for your mom during the last years of her life. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.